My 65-year-old body protested against early rising, but a habit developed from decades of library work kept me in bed, even after retirement. As soon as the clock struck 6 in the morning, I was standing at the window of my third-floor apartment in Westminster, watching the city slowly awaken from its slumber. The cold October wind blew the fallen leaves through the streets, a reminder of the inexorable passage of time. I, Ambrose Pilkington, had been a librarian at the Westminster Central Library all my life. Our library was housed in a beautiful Victorian building with high ceilings and huge windows. Even now, 2 years after retirement, I sometimes wake up feeling like I am late for work. At times like these, the hardest thing to remember is that Catherine is no longer around. Catherine is my late wife, who died of cancer 3 years ago. It was in the library that we met when she, then a history student, came to work on her thesis. Her brown hair and bright green eyes caught my eye, and when she spoke to me, asking about a rare book on Tudor history, I felt the world around me stop. She was 22, I was 27, and it was love at first sight. As I poured myself a cup of tea, I looked, as always, at the photograph of Catherine on the kitchen table. The picture had been taken on our silver wedding day. We had celebrated 25 years of married life with a trip to Scotland, a place my wife had always dreamed of visiting. In the photo, she is laughing in front of Eileen Donan Castle, with the wind ruffling her graying hair. Catherine missed our 30th anniversary by only 2 years. "Good morning, my dear," I whispered, touching the frame with my fingers. "It's supposed to rain again today." After Catherine died, our only daughter Liza insisted I sell the apartment and move into a nursing home, claiming I needed supervision. But I refused. This apartment held too many memories of my wife. We'd lived here for the last 15 years. I could feel her presence in every corner. After breakfast, I opened a book, another Agatha Christie detective novel, which I was rereading for the third time. My old co-workers often joked that I knew the contents of every book in the library, and there was some truth to that joke. I had indeed read an incredible number of books in my 40 years on the job, and literature had become second nature to me. The ringing of the phone interrupted my reading. Glancing at the screen, I saw my daughter's name and sighed heavily. My relationship with Liza had never been unclouded, but after Catherine's death, it was as if a chasm had passed between us. "Good morning, Liza," I said, trying to keep my voice upbeat. "Daddy, are you awake yet?" Her voice sounded like she was surprised by that fact. "I was wondering if you could pick Tommy up from school today. Sean has an important meeting, and I have to be at work until 8 o'clock tonight. Tommy is my 10-year-old grandson, the son of Liza and her husband, Sean Hollister. They have another daughter, 13-year-old Emily, but I see her even less often than I see Tommy." "Of course, I'd love to take him," I replied, my heart feeling warm at the thought of seeing my grandson. "Great. I'll tell him you'll be here at 3 o'clock. Just please don't give him sweets. He's allergic to chocolate." "Liza, I remember about his allergies," I reminded him gently. "I am his grandfather, after all." "Yes, yes, of course," she replied absently. "And Daddy, don't tell him your war stories. He had nightmares last time." I felt a wave of irritation rising inside me. I never told Tommy any scary war stories. I just shared some of my father's memories of World War II with him, quite harmless for a kid his age. "Okay, Liza, I'll be careful about what I talk about," I said dryly. "Thank you. I'm sorry, I have to run. Sean will pick up Tommy around 6. She disconnected without even waiting for my response. I put the phone down on the table and rubbed my temples. Sometimes I thought my daughter thought I was an old man, not quite capable of even properly interacting with my own grandson. And this after 40 years of dealing with people and books. The relationship with my son-in-law, Sean, was even more strained. A tall, athletically built man with a perpetually condescending smile, he worked as a financial consultant and seemed to measure the value of everything and everyone in the world solely by money. My modest librarian's pension and small savings made me a failure in his eyes despite all my knowledge and experience. I remember the first time Liza brought him into our home. At the time, Catherine and I were still living in our old family home in the suburbs. Sean was 28 and Liza was 25. He immediately started talking about his financial success, his new car, and his plans to buy a house. Catherine later confided to me that it seemed to her as if he had come not to meet the parents of the bride, but to interview for the position of son-in-law, demonstrating his wealth. Getting ready to meet my grandson took me longer than usual. I carefully chose clothes, trying to look presentable, but not too formal. In the end, I decided on dark blue pants, a light blue shirt, and a gray cardigan, a gift from Catherine for my 60th birthday. Brushing back my thinning gray hair, I scrutinized myself in the mirror. Wrinkles, age spots on my arms, thin-rimmed glasses, a typical pensioner. But in the depths of my blue eyes, there was still the same fire of curiosity that burned in my youth. On the way to Tommy's school, I went to a small bookstore and bought a book about dinosaurs, as my grandson had been interested in paleontology lately. Standing at the school gate, I was nervous, as if I were going on a first date. Children were running out of the school in groups, noisily discussing the previous day, and I stared intensely into their faces, searching for familiar features. Finally, I saw him, a small replica of my daughter, with the same brown hair and dimples in his cheeks when he smiled. When Tommy saw me, he smiled and ran toward me. "Grandpa," he exclaimed, hugging me. "Mommy said you were coming." "Hello, my boy," I hugged him back, feeling my heart fill with love. "Ha ha ha. How was your day at school?" "It was okay," Tommy shrugged. "We had division in math class today, and we drew a map of England. On the way home, I bought us both ice cream, no chocolate, of course, and listened to my grandson's stories about his school adventures." In my apartment, Tommy immediately rushed to look at the bookshelves. "Grandpa, you have so many books," he exclaimed delightedly. "Yes, I've built up quite a collection in my life," I smiled. "Look what I bought you." The book about dinosaurs made a sensation. We spent hours looking at the illustrations and reading descriptions of the ancient lizards. I told Tommy about natural history museums where you could see real dinosaur skeletons and promised to take him there someday. Time flew by, and soon the doorbell rang. Sean stood on the doorstep, impeccably dressed as always and with his usual condescending smile. "Good evening, Ambrose," he nodded. "Is Tommy giving you any trouble?" "Tommy's a wonderful boy," I replied sincerely. "We had a great time." "Daddy, look what Grandpa got me," Tommy exclaimed, running up to his father with the book. "It's very interesting," Sean said without much enthusiasm, taking a quick glance at the cover. "Come on, we have to go. Mom's waiting for us at home. Can I still come to Grandpa's house?" "Oh no," Tommy asked. "We'll see," Sean replied evasively. "Thanks, Ambrose. We'll go." "Bye, Grandpa," Tommy shouted, waving when they were already in the corridor. "Goodbye, my boy," I smiled, waving back. As I closed the door, I felt the apartment suddenly empty and quiet, like a book room after the library closed. I returned to the living room and sat in my favorite chair, looking thoughtfully at Catherine's picture. "You would be proud of our grandson," I said aloud. "He is such an inquisitive and intelligent boy." I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about my family. Liza had always been a difficult child, stubborn, willful, often in conflict with us. Catherine thought we were working too hard and not paying enough attention to our daughter, and maybe she was right. But after meeting Sean, Liza seemed to distance herself from us even more, adopting his attitude to life and his value system. When Catherine got sick, I hoped it would bring our family closer together, but the opposite happened. Liza and Sean rarely visited us, always citing busyness. We spent the last months of Catherine's life practically alone, save for occasional visits from the nurses and a few old friends. After the funeral, Sean offered to sell our house, claiming it was too big for one person and its upkeep would be too expensive for my pension. I resisted but eventually gave in, realizing he was partly right. That's how I ended up in that apartment. Smaller, but still spacious enough for my books and memories. From then on, our relationship with my daughter and son-in-law became even more formal. I only saw the grandchildren when it was convenient for Liza and Sean, usually when they needed a free babysitter. Sometimes I thought they were just waiting for me to get old enough to lose my independence so they could send me to a nursing home and completely forget I existed. But for now, I was determined to live on my own. I had my library, my books, my memories of Catherine, and most importantly, myself. Esteem, which I wasn't about to lose. As I fell asleep, I thought about the fact that despite all the hardships, I still had something to live for. For the sake of rare meetings with my grandchildren, for the memory of Catherine, for the knowledge and experience that I could still pass on to others. And with this thought, I finally fell into a dream in which I dreamed of a young Catherine laughing among the bookshelves of our library. Outside the window of my Westminster apartment, spring was beginning. The April breeze played with the curtains, bringing the scent of blooming flowers in the nearby park. It had been almost 6 months since I'd met Tommy, and I'd only seen my grandchildren twice since then, at Christmas and at Emily's birthday party in February. Both times were brief and closely monitored by Liza and Sean, as if they were afraid I might have some negative effect on the kids. The morning ringing of the phone snapped me out of my reverie. Liza's number on the screen made my heart clench. Lately, she'd only called me when she needed something. "Good morning, Liza," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded unusually soft, which made me even more wary. "How are you doing? You're not sick?" "I'm fine, thanks. How are the kids?" "They're good. Tommy won the school science Olympiad, and Emily got into the school choir." "Tell them congratulations. I'd like to see them soon." "Yeah, sure," Liza replied absent-mindedly, and I realized she'd gotten to the real reason for the call. "Dad, I have a favor to ask of you. We're having a little financial difficulty. Tommy's school is organizing a trip to a science camp. It's £500, and just now we need to make the second payment on the mortgage." I sighed. Such requests began to recur with frightening regularity. For Emily's tutor, for car repairs, for unexpected medical expenses. And each time Liza emphasized that these were temporary difficulties, that they would surely return the money when Sean received the promised promotion or bonus. "Liza, I already gave you £2,000 last month," I reminded her. "You said it was enough to cover all your expenses." "Yeah, but we didn't know about the camp then," she said, a hint of irritation in her voice. "Dad, you wouldn't want Tommy to miss out on an opportunity like this, would you?" I rubbed the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. Manipulating grandchildren had become Liza's favorite trick. "All right, I'll wire the money today," I gave in. "But Liza, my savings aren't infinite." "Thanks, Dad." She instantly cheered up. "You're the best. I'll forward the school's details to you." She disconnected without even asking if I needed help or if I wanted to see my grandchildren soon. I put the phone down and walked to the window. The old sycamore tree in the yard was turning tender green, reminding me of the cycle of life. How many springs had I already seen, and how many more were left? After lunch, I decided to take a walk to my former library. A few of my old colleagues were still working there, and from time to time I stopped by to see them and peruse the new editions. Mrs. Winslow, who had succeeded me as head librarian, always enjoyed my visits. "Ambrose, Adrian," she exclaimed when she saw me. "How nice to see you. We've just got a new collection of rare 19th century books that you must see." The next 2 hours flew by as we talked about books and library news. I almost forgot about the unpleasant morning conversation, but on the way home, the heavy thoughts returned. My pension was sufficient for a modest but comfortable life. After the sale of the family home, I had some money left over, which I planned to use for traveling. Catherine and I had always dreamed of traveling to the historic sites of Europe after retirement. Now those dreams were unfulfilled, and the money was slowly melting away thanks to Liza's constant requests. That evening, I received a call from my old friend Harrison Nightingale. He and I had met at university and had kept in touch over the years, even though his job as a bank manager often required traveling. "Ambrose, old boy," his deep voice sounded cheerful. "It's been a long time. How are you doing?" "Slowly, Harrison. How are you?" "Can't complain. Listen, I'm in London for a conference, so why don't you meet me for lunch tomorrow? There's a great little restaurant near your neighborhood." I was happy to say yes. Talking to Harrison always lifted my spirits. Unlike most of my acquaintances, he never treated me as a helpless old man, and was always interested in my opinion on politics, economics, and literature. The next day, we met at a small Italian restaurant. Harrison, as elegant as ever in his dark gray suit, looked younger than his 68 years. The gray on his temples only made him look more personable. "You've lost weight," he said after the greetings. "Is everything all right with your health?" "I'm just trying to watch my diet," I dismissed him. "The doctor said I needed to lower my cholesterol." We ordered pasta and a bottle of light wine, and the conversation flowed easily and casually. Harrison talked about his work, his plans for early retirement, and his grandchildren, whom, unlike me, he saw regularly. I shared news about the library and my recent books I'd read. "How's your Liza?" he asked as we were finishing dessert. I faltered. Harrison knew about my complicated relationship with my daughter, but I always tried to keep it to myself. "It's still the same," I finally answered. "I don't see them much. They're always busy." Harrison looked at me carefully. "Ambrose, we've known each other for almost 50 years. I can see that something is bothering you. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was just tension, but I suddenly felt the need to talk. They're always asking for money, Harrison, for one thing or another, and they always use the grandkids as leverage. If I don't give it to them, it means I don't love my grandchildren, don't want what's best for them." Harrison frowned. "And their own income? As I recall, your son-in-law makes a good living." "He does. Sean holds some high position in a finance company. Liza works in an advertising agency. They live in a big house, they have 2 cars, but they're always complaining about their finances." "How much have you given them so far?" I said the amount, and Harrison whistled. "That's a lot of money, my friend. Are you sure it's really going to your grandchildren?" It was a question I'd been asking myself for a long time, but I was afraid to ask it. What if Liza and Sean are just taking advantage of my kindness? What if the money I was giving, supposedly for the education and development of my grandchildren, was going to something else entirely? A week after meeting Harrison, I accidentally learned the answer to that question. Looking through the morning newspaper, I came across an advertisement for a travel agency offering a luxury vacation in the Maldives. I immediately remembered how at the last family dinner, which was back in January, Sean had mentioned his dream of visiting this paradise. My intuition told me that something wasn't right here. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Barrows, who had a granddaughter the same age as Tommy and went to the same school. "Mrs. Burrows, do you know if Tommy's school is organizing some kind of science camp trip?" "Camp?" she wondered. "No, I haven't heard of anything like that. My Lizzie would probably have mentioned it. She and Tommy are in the same class." My heart clenched with a bad feeling. I decided to call the school directly, posing as a grandfather who wanted to pay for his grandson's trip. "I'm sorry, sir," the school secretary answered, "but we don't have any science camps scheduled this semester. Perhaps you are confused about something? There could be no mistake. Liza had lied to me, using her grandson as an excuse to get money." Frustration and anger overwhelmed me. I decided to wait for her next call to clear the air. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Liza called again. "Dad, I'm sorry to bother you," she began in her begging voice. "We've run into some extra expenses for Tommy's camp. We need another 300 pounds for special equipment." "Liza," I interrupted her, trying to speak calmly, "I called Tommy's school. There's no science camp there." There was a long pause. "Are you following me?" Her voice went from pleading to accusatory in an instant. "Checking up on me? I just wanted to find out more about the camp. Thought maybe I should buy Tommy something useful for the trip." "You don't trust me?" She was practically screaming. "I'm your daughter, and you treat me like a fraud. Then explain to me where the money I give you really goes." Again a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Sean was having some financial problems. Some debts. We're just trying to get back on our feet." "And that's why you're lying to me about the children's needs?" I could feel my frustration turning to anger. "We knew you wouldn't just give money. You've always been stingy." Her voice shook with resentment and anger. "Stingy?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Liza, I've given you almost all of my savings for the last 2 years. It's crumbs compared to what you got from selling the house. You could have helped us with the down payment on our house, but you chose to keep it all for yourself." I was stunned by her claims. The house that Catherine and I had bought and paid off for 30 years was, in my daughter's eyes, something that should have gone to her simply because she was our daughter. "Liza, listen," I tried to speak calmly. "I understand that you may be having financial difficulties, but I don't like you using the kids as an excuse to get money. If you need help, just say so." "Fine," she replied coldly. "We need the money. Sean and I are planning a trip to the Maldives. It's our first real vacation in 3 years, and we deserve it. Are you going to help us or not?" Her candor stunned me. Not only had they lied to me about science camp, but they were planning a luxury vacation while constantly complaining about financial hardship. Liza, you and Sean are adults with good incomes. Why should I pay for your vacation? I asked calmly. Because you are my father, she exclaimed. You have to support your family. I support my family, I answered firmly. I am always ready to help with the education and health of my grandchildren, but I'm not going to pay for your luxurious vacation. Is that so? Her voice became icy. And then don't be surprised if you don't see your grandchildren again. Since you don't want to help us, we don't have to let you see them. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. Are you using my grandchildren as a weapon against me? I couldn't believe my ears. I'm just prioritizing, Dad. If you don't think we're worthy of your financial support, we don't think you're worthy of being part of our family. And she disconnected, leaving me in the deafening silence of my apartment. My hands shook as I placed the phone on the table. I never thought our relationship would get to a point where my own daughter would blackmail me with grandchildren. I spent the rest of the evening deep in thought, going over every moment of Liza's life, trying to figure out where Catherine and I had gone wrong in raising her. Maybe we'd spoiled her too much, or conversely, not giving her enough attention. The picture of Catherine on the bedside table seemed to silently ask me, what should we do with our daughter, Ambrose? I didn't know the answer. The night passed restlessly, and I fell into a restless sleep, or was awakened by the slightest noise. In the morning, I felt shattered, but my determination never left me. I couldn't let Liza and Sean continue to manipulate me through my grandchildren. With a heavy heart, I dialed Liza's number, but she didn't answer. I left a voicemail offering to meet and talk calmly, to explain my position. There was no response that day or the next. After a week of silence, I decided to take a different course of action. I called Tommy's school and found out the class schedule. That afternoon, I stood at the school gate waiting for classes to end so I could at least see my grandson from afar. As the children started to come out, I strained to see the stream of little figures. Suddenly, I saw Tommy walking with some woman, a nanny or housekeeper, whom I had not met before. I took a step forward, about to call out to him, but froze when I saw the woman looking around carefully, as if searching for someone. Her gaze settled on me, and she said something to Tommy, squeezing his hand tighter and quickening her pace. My heart clenched with pain. Liza had warned everyone who picked up kids from school about me. Had I become persona non grata in their lives because I refused to fund a vacation in the Maldives? With my head down, I wandered home. In my apartment, amidst books and memories, I felt more alone than ever. My gaze fell on Catherine's picture, and I suddenly visualized clearly what she would say in such a situation. Don't let them break you, Ambrose. You deserve respect and honesty, and you have a right to see your grandchildren. It had been 2 weeks since that unpleasant conversation with Liza. 2 weeks of silence and loneliness. I tried to call her several times, but she wouldn't return my calls. I sent an email offering to talk peacefully. It went unanswered. A few times I came to Tommy's school, but now he was being picked up by either Sean or the same strange woman, and they always looked around carefully, as if fearful of my appearance. On a Sunday morning in early May, I was awakened by a phone call. Liza's name popped up on the screen, and my heart shook as she finally decided to answer. Liza? I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Hi, Dad. Her voice was unusually soft. I was thinking about our last conversation. I think we both got a little emotional. I sat up on the bed, surprised by this sudden change in tone. I'm glad you called, I said carefully. I don't like the tension between us. I don't like it either, she said with remorse in her voice. Listen, why don't I come over tonight? We can talk quietly, have some tea. It's been so long since I've been to your place. It was true. Liza hadn't visited my apartment in months. Usually we met on neutral territory, in a cafe or a park, and rarely. Of course I'd be glad to, I replied, feeling the tension of the last few weeks begin to let go. Come over for dinner, and I'll cook something delicious. Great. I'll be there around 1 o'clock. And Dad, thanks for not being mean to me. After that conversation, I was encouraged. Maybe our conflict was just a misunderstanding we could work through. Perhaps Liza had realized that family relationships were more important than money and material possessions. I spent the morning preparing lunch. Baked chicken and vegetables, Liza's favorite dish since childhood. I cleaned the apartment, dusted off the photos on the mantelpiece, including pictures of little Liza from her first day of school, her university graduation, and her wedding. At exactly 1 o'clock, the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood Liza, elegant in a light blue dress, with a bouquet of spring flowers in her hands. "Hi, Dad." She smiled and hugged me. "These are for you." "Thank you, dear." I was touched by the gesture. "Come on in. I'm just finishing lunch." We sat down at the table and the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Liza asked me about my health, what I was doing in retirement, told me funny stories about my children, not a word about money, no hints of financial difficulties or requests for help. After lunch, we moved into the living room with cups of tea. Liza looked at the bookshelves, stopping at particularly interesting titles. "I remember you used to read to me before bed," she said, running her finger along the spine of an old storybook. "Every night, without exception, even when you came home from work tired." "Those were the best parts of the day," I replied sincerely. "You listened so enthusiastically, asked so many questions." Liza sat down next to me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder as if she were a child. "I'm sorry, Dad. I've been acting awful lately." "It's okay, honey," I stroked her hair. "The important thing is that we can talk and resolve our differences." Speaking of disagreements, she straightened up. "Sean and I had decided to postpone our trip to the Maldives. You were right. It was too expensive under our current circumstances." "It's a wise decision," I approved. "Maybe in a year or two, when you've paid off the mortgage." "Right," she nodded. "By the way, could you help me with one document? I need to fill out my tax return, and I have some questions." "You were always careful with documents." "Sure," I was happy to help. "What kind of questions?" "I have the return in my email. Can I use your computer to open it?" I led Liza into a small office where my old laptop stood and turned it on. "Make yourself comfortable and I'll make some fresh tea," I suggested. "Thanks, Dad," she smiled, sitting down at the table. While I was in the kitchen with the kettle, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Barrows, my neighbor, with another book she wanted to discuss. I invited her in for tea, introduced her to Liza, and we talked for nearly an hour about a new detective novel we'd both recently read. Liza listened patiently to our conversation, occasionally inserting remarks, but I could see she was bored. At last, Mrs. Barrows looked at her watch and exclaimed that she had forgotten all about the time and hurried away. "I'm sorry for this unplanned meeting," I said to Liza when we were alone again. "Mrs. Barrows often comes over to talk about books." "It's okay, Dad," she smiled. "I've already finished my declaration while you were discussing that detective anyway." "Thanks for your help." "I didn't help at all," I said, surprised. "I just looked at some of the old declarations in your files, just to give you an example. I hope you don't mind." "No, of course not." I was a little puzzled, but I didn't think much of it. Liza looked at her watch and sighed. "I gotta go, Dad. I promised Emily I'd help with her history project." "Sure, I understand." I walked her to the door. "Say hi to the kids. Maybe next time you can all come together?" "I will," she hugged me again. "Thanks for lunch and for understanding. I'll call you the other day." After she left, I felt unusually uplifted. Our relationship seemed to be on the mend, and the prospect of seeing grandchildren soon filled me with joy. That day was a Sunday, and the next morning, Monday, I went to the bank as usual to withdraw some cash for everyday expenses. My pension was deposited on the 20th of each month, and by the beginning of May, I should have a decent amount left. I inserted my card into the ATM, entered my PIN number, and selected the option to view my balance. What I saw on the screen made me go cold. Instead of the expected amount, there was only £15 and 80 pence in the account. There must be some mistake, I thought, and decided to speak to a bank employee. The young woman behind the counter listened to me carefully and checked the information on the system. "Mr. Pilkington, a transfer of £3,240 was made from your account yesterday," she said, looking at the monitor. "The transaction was made through online banking from your account." "But I didn't make any transfers," I exclaimed, feeling dizzy. "Are you sure? Perhaps you've forgotten." Her tone was polite, but I caught a hint of condescension, as if she were talking to an absent-minded old man. "I'm absolutely sure," I said firmly. "May I ask what account the transfer was made to?" She shook her head. That information is confidential, but if you think you've been a victim of fraud, we can initiate an investigation. To do so, you'll need to file a report. I filled out all the necessary forms, submitted the application, but in my heart, I already knew what had happened. Liza had used my computer to access my online banking. Maybe the password had been saved in my browser, or maybe she'd looked it up in my records, or maybe she had known my banking information for a long time. I had never kept such information from her, trusting my daughter completely. When I got home, the first thing I did was check my computer. The browser history did indeed show my bank's website open yesterday, at the time I'd spoken to Mrs. Barrows. Not only had Liza logged into my account, but she'd made the transfer while I'd been unsuspectingly discussing plot twists in a detective novel with my neighbor. The sense of betrayal was unbearable. My own daughter had stolen from me, taking advantage of my trust. And not just borrowing a small amount of money, she had taken almost my entire pension, leaving me destitute until my next paycheck, which was not due until 2.5 weeks later. I tried calling Liza, but she didn't answer. I left a message demanding an explanation, but there was no response. Then I dialed Sean's number. Same result. I even tried their home phone number, but no one was picking up there either. In desperation, I called my old friend Harrison. "Ambrose, what's wrong?" he asked when he heard my worried voice. I told him the whole situation, not hiding my shock and pain. "This is a real crime," Harrison said indignantly. "You have to go to the police." "I can't report my own daughter," I sighed. "Anyway, it's my blood." "Then at least talk to Thornton," Harrison suggested. "He's the manager at your bank now. Maybe he can help sort this out without a formal police report." Raymond Thornton was a university friend of mine and Harrison's, who had made a successful career in banking. A few years ago, he had become manager of the local branch of my bank, and we met occasionally, though not as often as we did with Harrison. "You're right," I agreed. "I'll call him tomorrow." "Call him now," Harrison insisted. "The sooner you deal with it, the better chance you have of getting your money back." I took his advice and contacted Thornton. He was shocked by my story and promised to take care of it personally the next morning. I spent the night with little sleep, going over the events of yesterday in my mind, trying to figure out how I could have been so blind and gullible. Had our reconciliation been just an act, played out for the sole purpose of gaining access to my money? Was my own daughter so cold-bloodedly planning this betrayal? In the morning, I met with Thornton in his office. He had already gone over the transaction information and looked serious. "Ambrose, the money had been transferred to your daughter's account," he said, and apparently almost immediately, most of it was used to pay for travel expenses. Maldives, I grinned bitterly. They had decided to go to the Maldives after all. "I guess so," Thornton nodded. "Now the question is, what do you want to do?" "I want my money back," I said firmly. "It's my pension, and I was counting on that money to live on." "There are two ways," Thornton explained. "The first is to file a formal fraud report. Then the bank will start an investigation, possibly involving the police. The second is for me to contact your daughter's bank unofficially, explain the situation, and try to block the account until the circumstances are clarified." The thought of Liza being prosecuted was unbearable, despite all the pain it caused me. "Let's try the second option," I decided. "Maybe when she realizes I'm serious about getting my money back, she'll come around." Thornton nodded and made a few phone calls. An hour later, he informed me that Liza's account had been temporarily blocked, and she would be notified as soon as she tried to use her card. "Thank you, Raymond." I shook his hand. "I owe you one." "Come on, Ambrose," he patted me on the shoulder. "What else are old friends for?" When I got home, I tried to contact Liza and Sean again, but they still weren't answering their phones. That evening, I received a text from Harrison, who apparently had also tried to call them. "They flew out this morning. Sean's office neighbor said they took a 2-week vacation and went to the Maldives. So they did it after all. Stole my money and flew off to a luxury resort, leaving me virtually destitute. The pain and disappointment I felt was beyond description." The next day, I got a call from Thornton. "Ambrose, there's news. Liza's bank has confirmed that most of the money was indeed used to pay for the vacation package, but the account's been blocked, and any further spending will be impossible." "What about their credit card?" I asked. "I took care of that too," Thornton replied. Given the unusual circumstances and the fact that the money was transferred without your consent, I contacted the credit card company for your daughter and her husband. They have also frozen their accounts until the circumstances are clarified. Thank you, Raymond. I was truly grateful for his help. Hopefully this would make them come to their senses. 3 days passed without any news. I lived frugally, trying to stretch what little cash I had left. Thoughts of Liza and Sean enjoying a luxurious vacation on my money kept me busy. On the fourth day, when I was almost resigned to the idea that I might not see my money, the phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with an international code. Ambrose Pilkington speaking, I answered. Daddy, what have you done? Liza's voice sounded hysterical. Our cards are blocked. We can't pay for the hotel. We're being evicted. Hello, Liza, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. It's good to finally hear your voice. You did that on purpose, didn't you? Her voice shook with rage. Is this revenge? I'm just trying to get my money back, I replied. The money you stole from me by taking advantage of my trust. I didn't steal it. I didn't steal it. I just took something you don't need anyway. You sit in your apartment. You don't go anywhere. You don't do anything. What do you need the money for? Her words struck me with their cynicism. I need this money to live, Liza, I said, trying to speak calmly. It's my pension that I've worked for 40 years for. My food, my bills, my medicine. You have savings, she exclaimed, or don't pretend to be poor. After all the money I've given you and Sean over the last few years, there's hardly any savings left, I replied bitterly. But that's not even the point. You came to me pretending you wanted to make up, but you tricked me and stole my money. How could you do that, Liza? There was silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard muffled voices. It sounded like Liza was discussing something with Sean. Dad, her voice sounded conciliatory now. I realized what I did was wrong, but we really needed this vacation. Sean was on the verge of a nervous breakdown because of work. I'm exhausted with the kids. We just wanted a little vacation. On me, I added. We were going to pay you back when Sean got his bonus next quarter. And that's why you didn't return my calls. Didn't explain the situation, didn't ask for a loan, but just stole it? Pause again. We knew you wouldn't agree, she finally answered. You were always stingy when it came to us. Those words were the last straw. All these years I'd given them most of my savings, giving up so much to help their family, and this was how she felt about it. Liza, my voice was calm and firm, I want my money back, all £3,240. Until then, your accounts will remain frozen. But we can't even pay for the hotel, she exclaimed. We'll be evicted to the street. How are we going to get home? That's your problem now, I replied. Maybe this will teach you not to steal from your own father. You monster, she shouted. You leave your own daughter without help in a foreign country. No, Liza, I said calmly. A monster is someone who steals from his elderly father, leaving him destitute, and then has the nerve to accuse him of being stingy. Think about that while you're looking for a way to get home. And I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mixture of pain and relief. The pain of realizing what our relationship had become, and the relief of finally telling my daughter everything I thought about what she had done. The phone rang again, the same number. I didn't bother to answer it. Then came the message, Daddy, please don't leave us here. We're desperate. I didn't answer that either. My heart was breaking with pain, but I realized that if I gave in now, it would only confirm their belief that I could be manipulated and used. That evening, Thornton called. Ambrose, the bank's international department, has been trying to contact you. Liza and Sean are requesting an unfreeze of at least some of the funds for the return tickets. What did you tell them? I asked. That it's up to you to make the decision, he said. After all, it's your money. I took a deep breath. Let the accounts stay frozen, Raymond. They'll have to find another way to get home. Are you sure? I could hear the doubt in his voice. They're in a foreign country. They've got friends, they've got Sean's family. They can go to them for help, I said firmly. They need to realize that their actions have consequences. I understand, Thornton replied. I'll convey your decision. After that conversation, I sat in my chair for a long time, looking at Catherine's picture. What would she say about my decision? Would she approve of being so hard on our daughter? Or would she advise me to be merciful? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't about toughness or mercy. It's about respect and responsibility. Liza and Sean had to realize that what they were doing wasn't just borrowing money from a father who doesn't spend it anyway. It was a betrayal of trust. It was theft. It was leaving an elderly man destitute. And if they had to experience some hardship at a luxury resort for them to realize that, so be it. After all, those hardships were the result of their own actions, not my vindictiveness. I was simply restoring justice. With that thought, I finally felt some peace of mind and was able to fall asleep, for the first time in many days without agonizing nightmares or waking up in the middle of the night. When I woke up the next morning, I lay staring at the ceiling of my bedroom for a long time. The sunlight was shining through the loose curtains, painting fanciful patterns on the wall. The decision to freeze Liza and Sean's accounts, which had seemed so right and fair yesterday, was giving me mixed feelings today. Was it the right thing to do? Was it too cruel to leave my own daughter stranded in a foreign country? After all, as it was, Liza was my only daughter, my blood and flesh, a part of me and Catherine. I got out of bed and walked to the window. Westminster was waking up, the streets slowly filling up with people rushing to work. A normal weekday for everyone but me. For me, it was a day of agonizing doubt and self-doubt. After breakfast, I pulled out an old photo album I kept in my bookcase. Flipping through the yellowed pages, I stared at the pictures of little Liza. Here she was, newborn, a tiny bundle in the hands of a happy Catherine. Here's her first birthday. Chubby cheeks smeared with chocolate cake, eyes shining. First steps, first word, first day of school. When did it all go wrong? When did my little girl, who looked at me with such adoration, turn into a man capable of stealing from her own father? I remembered her childhood. Liza had always been a willful child, with a strong character and obvious leadership qualities. Already in elementary school, she was able to organize other children around her, inventing games and entertainment. Teachers noted her sharp mind and creative abilities, but also her tendency to manipulate when things did not go according to her plan. I remember one incident when she was about 8 years old. Catherine and I refused to buy her an expensive toy, explaining that we couldn't afford it now. Liza threw such a tantrum that the store clerks started throwing judgmental looks at us. She didn't say a word on the way home, and in the evening we discovered that she had broken Catherine's favorite vase and said it was revenge for refusing to buy the toy. We punished her then by depriving her of watching TV for a week. Liza apologized, but there was no remorse in her eyes, just calculation and a lingering resentment. Even then, we should have paid more attention to building her character, understanding the value of money and respect for other people's property. But we were so busy working, providing for our family. I was working late at the library. Catherine was moonlighting as a private history tutor. We tried to give Liza everything she needed: a good education, the opportunity to study in clubs and sections, trips during vacations. But perhaps we missed the most important thing: to teach her empathy, compassion, respect for others. Or maybe it was our relationship with Catherine. We rarely argued, especially in front of our daughter, but Liza was always very sensitive to the slightest change in the atmosphere in the house. Perhaps she sensed the tension that sometimes arose between us because of fatigue or domestic problems, and this affected her perception of family relationships. Or did the problem originate in adolescence? Liza was 14 when she began to actively resist our rules and restrictions. She demanded more freedom, more pocket money, expensive clothes, like everyone else. We tried to explain to her that we live within our means, that it is not material values that matter, but knowledge, experience, human relationships. But she perceived this as the nerdiness of old, fashioned parents who do not understand modern life. At university, Liza became completely estranged from us, came home only on holidays, rarely called, avoided talking about her life. Catherine and I were worried, but tried to give her space to be independent, hoping it was just a natural process of growing up. When she introduced us to Sean, we immediately sensed that he wasn't the man who would make her happy. But what could we say? Daughter, your chosen one is too materialistic and narcissistic? It would only have alienated her more. So we smiled and accepted it, hoping we were wrong in our assessments. After they married, Liza began to look more and more like Sean. The same materialistic values, the same desire for outward success and recognition. They bought a house they could barely afford, cars of the latest models, organized expensive parties for colleagues and useful acquaintances. And they constantly complained about financial difficulties, insinuating that we, as parents, should help them. Thinking about Liza and our relationship with her occupied me all day. I tried to figure out at what point I had made a critical mistake as a father that had allowed her to grow up to be a person capable of such an act. Harrison called this evening. "How are you, old boy?" he asked after a greeting. "Thinking," I answered honestly. "I don't know if I did the right thing." "Listen, Ambrose," he said, his voice firm. "You have done nothing wrong. They stole your money. You're just protecting yourself and your livelihood. But leaving them without help in a foreign country, they're adults, Ambrose. They've got friends, they've got family, they've probably got credit cards from other banks. They'll find a way home." His words reassured me a little, but the guilt still lingered. I spent the rest of the evening thinking, flipping through old photo albums and remembering how Catherine had handled the problems with Liza. Catherine had always been more patient and understanding. "She's just looking for herself," she said of our rebellious teenage daughter. "She needs time to figure out what's really important in life," she consoled me when Liza once again refused to come over for the weekend. "Sean isn't that bad. You're just not used to his manner of speaking," she coaxed when I complained about my son-in-law's arrogance. Catherine had a knack for finding excuses and explanations for Liza's behavior, for seeing the best in people even when they showed their worst qualities. What would she say now? Would she advise me to be merciful, to unfreeze the accounts, to help my daughter and son-in-law come home? Or would she support my firmness, realizing that sometimes only facing the consequences of one's actions can teach a person important life lessons? I didn't know the answer. Catherine was not around, and I had to make decisions on my own, relying only on my own ideas of justice and parental love. Before going to bed, I took a long look at my wife's picture by the bedside. "What would you do in my place, my dear?" I asked aloud, even though I knew I wouldn't get an answer. In the night, I dreamed of Catherine. She was standing on the beach in the very dress she loved so much, white with small blue flowers. The wind was playing with her hair, and she was looking at me with a gentle smile. "You always did your best for her, Ambrose," she said in my dream. "Ashram, but sometimes loving means letting a person face the consequences of their mistakes." I woke with the first rays of the sun, feeling strangely calm. The dream, of course, was just a projection of my own thoughts, but it helped me make a decision. I wouldn't unlock Liza and Sean's accounts. They would have to find a way out of the situation on their own. Having made that decision, I was relieved. The weight of the doubts that had plagued me all the previous day had receded. I didn't know if it was the right choice, but it was my choice based on my understanding of justice. After breakfast, I received a call from Thornton. "Ambrose," he began without preamble, "Liza's bank has contacted us again. They are asking for at least part of the account to be unblocked to pay for her lodging and her return home." "My decision hasn't changed, Raymond," I said firmly. "The accounts remain frozen until my money is returned." "I'll tell him so," he replied. "Hang in there, buddy." I spent the rest of the day trying to get my mind off Liza and Sean. I went to the library, had lunch with Mrs. Barrows, who, unaware of the situation, told me about her upcoming trip to visit her sister in Scotland. In the evening, I forced myself to sit down at the computer and check my mail, although I didn't expect to find anything interesting there at all. To my surprise, among the spam and newsletters from bookstores was an email from Emily, my granddaughter. "Grandpa, why did you block Mom and Dad's cards? They are desperate and have been calling me and crying. Please help them." My heart clenched with pain. So Liza and Sean were even using the kids to pressure me. But at the same time, I felt sorry for Emily, who had gotten caught up in adult problems and was now worried about her parents. I wrote her back, trying to be as honest as possible, but at the same time not going into details that would further upset a 13-year-old girl. "Dear Emily, don't worry. Your parents will be fine. There has been a misunderstanding between us that we will surely resolve. I love you and Tommy, and I miss you very much. I hope to see you soon. Your grandfather." As I sent the letter, I thought about what was going on with Liza and Sean right now. How are they coping with the situation? Have they found a way to pay for their hotel and return tickets? Or are they still confused and angry, blaming me for all their problems? My mind obligingly painted a picture of their stay in the Maldives before they discovered the card blockage. Here they are enjoying a luxurious bungalow over crystal clear waters. Sean, in his expensive sunglasses, is sipping a cocktail while lying on a lounge chair. Liza takes pictures of the tropical fish swimming just beneath the transparent floor of their lodge. They order gourmet meals at the hotel restaurant without thinking about the price. Sean brags to other vacationers about his business successes. Lisa talks about her talented children and their accomplishments. Not a word about the fact that their luxurious vacation was paid for with money stolen from their elderly father. And then there's the moment of truth. They come to pay for yet another expensive dinner or spa treatment, and their card doesn't work. Bewilderment, attempts to use another card, same result. A call to the bank, shocking news that all accounts have been blocked. Panic, anger, despair. Picturing this scene, I felt a strange satisfaction that was immediately replaced by shame. I shouldn't be happy about other people's problems, even if those people hurt me. It was unworthy of me, unworthy of the values that my parents had taught me and that Catherine and I had tried to pass on to Liza. But still, wasn't there an element of revenge in my decision to block their accounts? Didn't I want them to experience the same sense of helplessness and vulnerability that I had experienced when I discovered that all my money was gone? Was my motivation purely to simply get my funds back, or did I also want to teach them a lesson, to make them feel the consequences of their actions? These questions plagued me all evening. I did not find unequivocal answers to them. Perhaps my actions were both: a desire to protect myself, to get back what was mine, and a desire to punish, to teach them a lesson. I was just a human being, with all human weaknesses and contradictions. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't just forgive and forget what they had done. It wasn't just about the money, although losing it was a serious blow to me. It was the betrayal of trust, the cynicism with which they had used my affection and love for them. Before I went to bed, I looked at Catherine's picture again. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, darling," I said quietly, "but I'm doing what I think is fair. I hope you would understand me." That night I slept peacefully, without nightmares or awakenings. In the morning I woke up rested and with a clear head. Whatever was happening to Liza and Sean now, whatever difficulties they had to overcome, it was the result of their own actions. I didn't need to feel guilty about defending myself and my rights. After eating breakfast, I decided to spend the day at the park. The weather was beautiful and I wanted to clear my head, get some fresh air, and people. Watch. I took a book, sandwiches, and a thermos of tea with me and went to a small park not far from my house. Sitting on a bench under an old oak tree, I watched the children playing on the playground, the young mothers carefully watching their babies, the elderly couples strolling leisurely along the paths. Ordinary life, ordinary people, ordinary joys and worries. And suddenly the thought struck me. Liza had never been truly happy. Even as a child, receiving the gifts she wanted or excelling in school, she had always wanted more, better, different. Meeting Sean had only reinforced this trait of her character. Her perpetual dissatisfaction, her pursuit of material goods and status symbols. Maybe that was my biggest mistake as a father. I failed to teach her to enjoy simple things, to appreciate what she already has, to find satisfaction in small things. I failed to impart to her the wisdom that comes to a person over the years. Happiness is not in the quantity of money and things, but in the quality of relationships, in the depth of experience, in the meaningfulness of existence. But was it too late? Could Liza have changed, reconsidered her values and priorities? Or would this story of stealing my money and the difficulties that followed only harden her further, make her believe that the world was unfair and that the people closest to her were untrustworthy? I didn't know the answer to that question. All I could do was stay true to my principles and values, leading by example even when it was difficult, and hope that someday Liza would be able to see and understand what was now hidden from her. With these thoughts, I returned home feeling strangely peaceful. The situation with Liza and Sean was still unresolved. My money still hadn't been returned, but I was no longer plagued by doubts and guilt. I had done what I thought was right, and I was ready to accept whatever consequences my decision brought. It was evening in the Maldives when Liza and Sean returned to their bungalow after dinner at a luxurious restaurant on the beach. The day had been perfect. A morning snorkeling among tropical fish, an afternoon massage at the hotel spa, and a romantic candlelit dinner overlooking the sunset. The perfect ending to the first week of their long-awaited vacation. "Are you going scuba diving tomorrow?" "Ha," Sean asked, unbuttoning his shirt and turning on the air conditioner. "Yes, at 10 in the morning," Liza answered, taking off her earrings in front of the mirror. "And I've booked us a boat for the day after tomorrow, so we'll sail around the island and watch the dolphins." "Great," Sean smiled, walking over to the minibar. "Do you want something?" "No thanks, I'm tired," Lisa stretched. "Just imagine, we're just at the equator of our vacation. There's still a whole week of paradise left." Sean opened a bottle of water and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Your father hasn't called again?" Liza wrinkled her nose. "No, and I don't want to think about him right now. He always had a way of ruining the mood." "Do you think he'll call the police?" "I don't think so. He's too much of a man of integrity to take his family problems public." Liza shrugged. "Besides, what would he say? That his adult daughter took money from an account she had access to? Even if he did go somewhere, the most he'd be told would be to settle the family dispute civilly." Sean nodded, but concern flashed in his eyes. "What about his banker friend? You said he had some connections at your bank." "Dad's old buddy Thornton?" Lisa waved her hand. "He's as old-fashioned and proper as Dad. The most he'll do is call me and try to shame me. Don't worry, darling. It'll be all right. Just relax and enjoy it. We deserve this vacation." With these words, she went to the bathroom, humming a trendy tune under her nose. Sean remained sitting on the bed, staring pensively into space. Something told him they shouldn't have done that to the old man, but the prospect of spending 2 weeks in paradise overrode all moral doubts. After all, they really deserved this vacation after 3 years without a proper vacation. Liza came out of the bathroom, smelling of expensive cream, and slid under the sheet. "We have an early rise tomorrow," she reminded him. "Don't stay up too late." Sean nodded and went to take a shower. Soon they were asleep, lulled by the sound of the surf and the hum of the air conditioner. The morning began as planned, with an early rise and a hearty breakfast. At 9:30 they were already at the diving center, where the instructor gave a brief briefing before the dive. All the necessary paperwork had been signed and the gear prepared. "Payment will be debited from your card after the completion of the dive," said the manager of the center. A common practice for such activities. Liza and Sean looked at each other and nodded. The dive went great. Coral reefs, exotic fish, even a small turtle swimming a few meters away from them. After returning to shore still full of impressions, they went to the hotel restaurant for lunch. "It was amazing," Lisa marveled as she looked at the photos the instructor had taken during the dive. "We'll have to show the kids when we get back." Sean nodded in agreement, beckoning the waiter to order more drinks. After lunch, they decided to return to the bungalow to rest before the evening program, a dinner with live music and national dances. On the way, they were stopped by a hotel employee. "Mr. and Mrs. Hollister?" He addressed them politely. "The manager asked you to come to the reception. There is a question about your reservation." "A question?" Sean was surprised. "What question could there be? We paid everything in advance." "I'm not aware of the details, sir," replied the employee. "The manager will explain everything." They were met in the lobby by the senior manager of the hotel, an elegant middle-aged man with impeccable manners. "Mr. and Mrs. Hollister, thank you for coming in," he began. "We've had a little problem paying for your extras." "What extras?" Sean frowned. "Spa treatments, last night's dinner at the beach restaurant, today's scuba diving." The manager checked his tablet. "When you try to debit, the system says no. Maybe there's a problem with your card?" Sean pulled out his wallet and held out another card. "Try this one." The manager nodded politely and went back to the counter. He returned a few minutes later with the same polite smile, but with concern in his eyes. "Unfortunately, the system is rejecting this card as well, sir. Perhaps we should contact your bank." Liza felt a chill run down her spine. Had her father done something about it? "Do you have a computer with internet access?" she asked. "I'd like to check my bank account." The manager escorted them to the hotel's business center and left them alone with the computer. Liza quickly entered her online banking information and froze, staring at the screen. Sean, her voice trembled, the account is locked. There's a message about suspicious activity and a request to contact the bank. Let me check mine. Sean pushed her away and logged into his account. Shit. Same thing. They looked around, realizing the gravity of the situation. All of their cards were linked to accounts at the same bank. It was more convenient to manage the family finances. It's your father, Sean hissed. He did it after all. No way, Lisa shook her head. He wouldn't. He knows we're on vacation, that we need money to get back. As you can see, he did. Sean slammed the lid of his laptop shut. What do we do now? They returned to the manager, who was waiting patiently in the lobby. We have some technical problems with the cards, Sean began, trying to speak confidently. We'll contact the bank and sort it out. It won't take long. Of course, sir, the manager nodded, but I must warn you that according to the hotel rules, we can't provide additional services without payment guarantee. And if the problem is not solved within 24 hours, we'll have to ask you to vacate the room. 24 hours, Liza exclaimed. But our reservation is still a week away. The basic accommodation you paid for in advance is indeed booked for 2 weeks, the manager explained. But the additional services you have already used remain unpaid. Plus, under the terms of the reservation, the hotel has the right to ask for a deposit in case of damage to property or unpaid services. Normally, we just block the appropriate amount on the guest card upon check-in. So what now? Sean sounded desperate. I suggest you contact your bank as soon as possible to resolve the problem, said the manager. In the meantime, perhaps you have another way to pay? A card from another bank? Cash? Liza and Sean looked at each other again. All of their cards were linked to accounts that were apparently now blocked. They only had about $200 in cash for small expenses and tips. We'll figure it out, Sean assured them. Give us a little time. Back at the bungalow, they tried to call their bank, but the time difference and the complicated answering system made it difficult. When they finally managed to speak to a live person, the news was disappointing. Your accounts have indeed been blocked at the request of another financial institution due to an investigation into a potentially fraudulent transaction, the bank employee said. I can't provide more information over the phone. You need to go to a bank branch in person with documents. But we are abroad, Liza exclaimed. We can't just go to the branch. I'm sorry, ma'am, but it's a security policy, replied the employee. Perhaps you can go to the nearest branch of our partner bank in the Maldives? There are no branches of your partner bank on this island, Sean hissed. The nearest one is in the capital, on another island. Then I'm afraid you'll have to wait until you get home to deal with this issue in person. But we can't go home without money. Liza was almost screaming. It's a vicious circle. I understand your frustration, ma'am, the officer replied nonchalantly. Perhaps you have relatives or friends who could transfer money to you via Western Union or a similar service? After this useless conversation, Liza and Sean sat on the bed, trying to comprehend the situation. This is a disaster, Lisa whispered. We're stuck here with no money, with unpaid bills for services we've already used, and no way to buy return tickets. All because of your father, Sean hissed. I told you not to take money out of his account. I should have waited for my bonus. It doesn't matter now, Liza cut him off. They had to figure out how to get out of this situation. They went over every possible option. Call their friends? But who of their friends would be able to lend them the money needed to pay for the hotel and the flight? Besides, explaining the situation would be extremely humiliating. Sean's family? His parents were retired and unlikely to have such funds, and he hadn't spoken to his brother in years because of an old quarrel. I'm going to have to call your father, Sean finally said. I don't see any other way. Lisa was silent, staring into space. The thought of asking her father for help after they'd cheated him and stolen his money seemed unbearable. But there really was no alternative. All right, she said at last. I'll call him. With shaking hands, she dialed her father's number. It took forever before she heard his voice. Ambrose Pilkington, speaking. Dad, Liza began, trying to keep her voice calm. We need to talk. I'm listening. His tone was cold and detached. You blocked our accounts? It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I took steps to get my money back, he replied calmly. The money you stole, Liza. Daddy, we're in a very difficult situation. She tried to be reasonable. We could be evicted from the hotel. We have no money for return tickets. We're stranded on an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. This is the consequence of your actions. Her father's voice remained calm. You decided to steal my money to pay for a luxury vacation. Now you're facing the consequences. But Dad, a pleading note appeared in her voice. What do we do? How do we get home? You have friends? You have Sean's relatives. Ask them for help. You can't do this to us, Liza exclaimed, feeling panic overwhelm her. I'm your daughter. Yes, you are, Ambrose agreed, and that's why I'm especially hurt by what you've done. You deceived me, used my trust, stole my money, the money I live on, Liza, and you never once considered how I'd cope without my pension until my next paycheck. We were going to get the money back, she protested, when Sean gets his bonus. Now you know what it's like to have your last dime taken from you, Ambrose interrupted her. I've always helped you, and you've stolen my pension. You're on your own. Papa, please. There was desperation in her voice. We can't stay here. We have children at home. The children are in the care of my neighbor, Mrs. Barrows, Ambrose replied calmly. I contacted her when I heard that you had left without telling me. She agreed to look after them until you returned. Liza gasped with indignation. You had no right to interfere. And you had no right to steal my money, he countered. But that didn't stop you from doing it. What do you want from us? Liza blurted out. I want my money back, all 3,240 pounds. But we don't have that kind of money now. We can't even go home. It's your problem, Liza. Ambrose's voice remained firm. You've created this situation, and you're the one who has to deal with it. You're a monster, you monster, she shouted, unable to contain her rage. How can you do this to your own daughter? No, Liza, he said calmly. A monster is someone who steals from her elderly father, leaving him destitute, and then has the nerve to accuse him of cruelty. Think about that while you're looking for a way to get home. And he hung up. Liza sat staring at the phone in her hand, unable to believe what had just happened. Her father, always so soft and accommodating, had just refused to help her in perhaps the most difficult situation of her life. What did he say? Sean asked, watching the conversation with growing concern. He refused to help, Liza's voice shook. He said we created this situation and we should deal with it. He can't do that, Sean exclaimed. It's inhumane. He said we'd find out what it was like to have the last thing taken from you, Liza sobbed. That we'd stolen his pension and now we had to manage on our own. Sean sat down next to her on the bed with his arms around his head. What are we going to do? He asked after a long pause. Liza didn't answer. The shock of talking to her father was slowly being replaced by anger. How could he do this to her? After all the years she had put up with his boring, old-fashioned attitudes, his constant lectures about the importance of living within one's means and not chasing material possessions. And now that she had only taken some money, the money they were going to pay back. He's leaving her in the lurch. That old cheapskate, she shouted, jumping up from the bed. He's always been like that, always counting every penny, always denying me what the other children had. And now that he has an opportunity for revenge, he takes it without thinking of the consequences. Liza, calm down. Sean tried to hug her, but she pushed him away. No, you don't understand, she continued. All my life, he's been controlling me with his money. Liza, we can't afford this toy. Liza, this university is too expensive. Liza, you're living beyond your means. And now that I've finally taken what's rightfully mine, he's taking this petty revenge. Liza, Sean began gently, I understand your resentment, but right now we need to think about getting out of here. Your father won't help, that's clear, so we need to look for other options. What other options? She waved her hands in the air. We don't have any money, all our cards are blocked. Our friends won't lend us that much money. Maybe my mother? Sean suggested uncertainly. She's not rich, but she might be able to lend enough for return tickets, and we'll pay the rest to the hotel when we get back and unlock the accounts. Liza nodded slowly, wiping away her tears. Yes, let's give it a try. although it would be terribly humiliating to explain to her why we were in this situation. We'll have to embellish the story a little, Sean muttered, pulling out his phone. We'll say that the bank blocked the cards because of suspicious activity. We're abroad after all. He dialed his mother's number, but the connection was bad, and the conversation turned out to be stilted. Eventually, promising to call back when he had a better signal, Sean hung up. We should go down to the lobby. The connection is better there, he said, and at the same time talk to the hotel manager, explain the situation, ask for a delay in payment. They went downstairs, but talking to the manager was no relief. The hotel's rules were strict. Without paying for extras and providing a valid card to guarantee it, they would have to vacate the room within 24 hours. But where would we go? Liza asked in desperation. There are no other hotels on the island, and it's a boat ride to the nearest village. I'm sorry, ma'am. The manager did look sympathetic. But I can't break the rules. Perhaps you should contact your country's embassy. Embassy? Sean repeated as if tasting the word. Yeah, that's an idea. They're supposed to help citizens in trouble abroad, right? The manager nodded. Of course. You can use our phone for international calls. But that option wasn't so easy either. The nearest embassy of their country was in the capital, on another island. They could get there by ferry or small plane, but that again required money. We're trapped, Liza whispered when they returned to the bungalow after a series of fruitless attempts to find a way out. It's because of my father. He's doing this on purpose to punish us. It's not just him, Sean said quietly. Anna, we made a mistake too, taking his money without authorization. Are you taking his side now? Liza jumped up. After everything he's done? I'm not on anyone's side, Sean replied tiredly. I'm just trying to be objective. We took the money without asking. He blocked our accounts. Now we're all screwed. Liza didn't answer, staring out the window at the azure sea, which yesterday had seemed so beautiful, but today had become a barrier separating them from home. I'll call him again, she said at last. I'll try to explain how serious the situation is. Maybe he'll soften. But Ambrose didn't answer the phone. After the fifth attempt, Liza gave up, throwing the phone on the bed. He's ignoring me, she exclaimed. My own daughter. Let's try my mother again, Sean suggested, and I can try to call work, explain the situation. Maybe they can arrange a money transfer. They went down to the lobby, where the connection was better, and Sean was finally able to talk to his mother. The conversation was long and emotional, but in the end she agreed to help, even though she couldn't provide the full amount needed. She'll send £1,000 via Western Union, Sean informed her, turning back to Liza. That should be enough for economy class tickets home, but we still need to decide on a hotel. Maybe your job, Liza asked hopefully. Sean shook his head. I haven't gotten through to my boss, and the accounting department can't make such transfers without his approval. They returned to the room feeling cornered. The situation seemed hopeless. Sean's mother's help was only part of the problem, and Ambrose seemed to be adamant. I'll never forgive him for this, Liza whispered, staring at the ceiling. Never. It was a strange feeling, knowing that Liza and Sean were coming home, but not wanting to meet them at the airport like a loving father would. Harrison, who kept in constant contact with me all these days, said they flew out of the Maldives in economy class after Sean's mother sent them money via Western Union. According to Harrison, they had to leave a receipt for the debt at the hotel and a promise to repay it within a month. I felt no schadenfreude upon learning of their humiliating situation, but there was no pity either, only fatigue and deep disappointment. During these days, I thought a lot about our family, about my relationship with Liza, and I came to the sad conclusion that a toxic relationship cannot be fixed by unilateral concessions. No matter how much I forgave, no matter how much I gave, Liza and Sean just took it for granted, a sign of my weakness to be taken advantage of. My money still hadn't been paid back, and I was living frugally, stretching the small savings I kept at home in cash. Thornton, true to his word, hadn't lifted the lock on Liza and Sean's accounts, despite their calls and letters to the bank. They're coming back tomorrow, Harrison informed me over the phone that evening. Are you ready to meet them? I don't plan to meet them, I answered, surprising even myself with the firmness of my voice. I want my money back first. What if they come to your house, I wondered. There was a good chance that Liza and Sean would show up at my house right after I got back. Not out of remorse, of course, but out of a desire to unlock their accounts as soon as possible. I'll be polite, but firm, I finally replied. They must understand that my trust cannot be bought with apologies. That's right, Harrison approved. Stick to that line. They showed up on my doorstep the day after I got back. The doorbell rang around 11 in the morning as I was finishing breakfast. When I opened the door, I saw Liza and Sean, tired with dark circles under their eyes, but clearly determined. Hello, Dad, Liza began in what she probably thought was a conciliatory tone. May I come in? We need to talk. I stepped back silently, letting them into the apartment. We made our way to the living room, where I motioned for them to sit down. No one showed any desire to hug or exchange the usual pleasantries. Tea, coffee? I asked, more out of politeness than hospitality. No, thank you. Liza clasped her hands nervously in her lap. Daddy, we came to apologize. I looked at her carefully, then shifted my gaze to Sean. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere but here. I'm listening, I said, sitting down in my chair across from them. We did the wrong thing, Liza continued, avoiding my gaze. We shouldn't have taken your money without permission. It was a mistake, and we're truly sorry. Really sorry? I asked calmly. Or do you just need me to unlock your accounts? Liza flared up, but quickly pulled herself together. Of course we want the accounts unlocked, she admitted, but we're also truly sorry for what happened. It was a moment of weakness. We didn't think about the consequences. Namely that your father will be left destitute, I clarified. Yes, she nodded. We were selfish and thought only of ourselves. Sean was still silent, clearly uncomfortable. He'd always preferred that Liza talk to me, though, because he thought it was a woman's job. What do you suggest, I asked, looking at them both. We want to make things right, Liza said hastily. Get your money back, fix things. We realize we've lost your trust, but we hope that in time we can regain it. When are you going to get my money back? I got straight to the point, not giving in to emotional appeals. They looked at each other. That's the problem, Dad, Liza said. Our accounts are locked. We have no access to money. We can't even pay the mortgage, let alone pay you back. So you want me to unlock your accounts before I get my money back? I clarified. We promise to pay everything back as soon as we get access to the accounts. Sean finally intervened. You have my word of honor. I stared at them in silence, trying to figure out how sincere their promises were. Liza's eyes were filled with impatience and irritation, poorly disguised as remorse. Sean just looked tired and wanted to end this unpleasant conversation as soon as possible. I'm afraid I can't trust you, I said at last. You've already betrayed my trust once, using an ostensible reconciliation to steal my money. But Daddy, Liza stepped forward, how are we going to get your money back if we can't access it? I don't know, Liza, I said. That's your problem, not mine. Maybe you can sell some of your stuff? Or borrow from friends? Or, I couldn't help the slight irony, ask Sean's mother for help, like you did for the return tickets? Liza flared, and Sean tensed. That was humiliating, he hissed, explaining to my mother why we had to ask for money for tickets home. Imagine how humiliating it was for me, I countered, explaining to the bank why I couldn't pay my rent or groceries this month. There was a long pause. Liza and Sean clearly hadn't expected me to be so adamant. Okay, Liza finally said, standing up. We'll find a way to pay you back. But I was hoping you'd be more understanding. After all, we're a family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Liza, I said quietly. A family supports each other and respects each other's boundaries. What you've done shows me that you don't consider me part of your family, just a source of money when you need it. That's not fair, she exclaimed. We made a mistake, but that doesn't mean we don't consider you family. Prove it, I suggested. Not with words, but with actions. Give me my money back, and then we'll talk about repairing the relationship. They left, clearly upset and angry. I knew that in their eyes I looked like a cruel and vindictive old man, unable to forgive my only daughter. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing the right thing, protecting my boundaries and my dignity. 3 days later, Harrison informed me that Liza had pawned her expensive jewelry and Sean had sold his collector's watch to raise the necessary amount. The money was transferred to Thornton's account, who then wired it to me. All £3,240, every last penny. Liza and Sean's accounts were then unlocked, but our relationship remained strained. They expected me to forgive them when the money was returned and everything would go back to normal. But I realized that I couldn't and didn't want to go back to the previous relationship model where I was used and manipulated. The decision came unexpectedly during a conversation with Mrs. Barrows, who remarked, "You know, Ambrose, sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves is to start over. A new place, new people, new interests." The thought lingered in my mind. Why not really start over? My apartment in downtown Westminster was expensive, and a good portion of my pension was going to pay rent. If I moved to a quieter neighborhood, I could save substantially and maybe even afford the little trips Catherine and I had always dreamed of taking. I started looking for a new place to live, and after a month I found the perfect option, a small but cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Westminster. It was almost half the price of my current apartment and was close to a beautiful park and the local library. The decision to move wasn't easy for me. There were so many memories of Catherine in the old apartment, so many familiar things and places, but I knew it was necessary, not only for financial reasons, but also for my emotional well-being. I needed to physically distance myself from Liza and Sean, to create my own space where they couldn't just show up and disturb my peace. I didn't inform them of my plans, but of course they found out. Mrs. Barrows casually mentioned my impending move when Liza stopped by to pick up the kids after school. That same evening, the phone rang. "Is it true you're moving?" Liza asked without preamble. "Yes," I answered calmly. "I found an apartment that better suits my current needs and abilities." "And you weren't going to tell us?" There was resentment in her voice. "I was going to when it was finalized," I lied. "Dad," her voice softened, "I realize you're still angry with us. But do you really want to cut all ties? Think of the kids. They miss you." The mention of grandchildren hurt my heart. I did miss Tommy and Emily, but I realized that Liza was using them as a manipulative tool again. "I'm not going to cut ties with my grandchildren," I said firmly, "but I need space and time to think things through. Recent events have shown me that our relationship has not been healthy, and I don't want to continue in that vein. So you haven't forgiven us." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "It's not about forgiveness, Liza," I sighed. "It's about trust. I can't trust you anymore, and that's a fundamental problem. You can't have a healthy relationship without trust. So what do you suggest? Cut ties completely?" "I'm suggesting we give each other space. I will communicate with my grandchildren, but on my terms, without manipulation or pressure from you." After that conversation, there was a truce. Liza didn't try to meet me or call me for trifles anymore. I moved into a new apartment and began to settle into my new place. The first weeks after the move weren't the easiest. I missed the old neighbors, the familiar routes, the familiar views from the window. But gradually, the new place began to seem more and more cozy and my own. I put books on the shelves, hung pictures on the walls, planted some plants on the small balcony. At the local library, I met a group of retired people who met twice a week to discuss books. I was welcomed with open arms when they learned of my background as a librarian. Soon I was making reading recommendations and helping to organize topical discussions. Through this book club, I met Eleanor Brooks, a charming widow my age who taught English literature at a local school until her retirement. We turned out to have a lot in common: a love of classic literature, an interest in history, and similar outlooks on life. We began meeting for walks in the park and trips to museums. Eleanor did not replace Catherine for me. No one could have done that. But her company brought me joy and made me feel that life went on, that at 65 it was still possible to start something new. I kept in touch with my grandchildren through email and occasional meetings, which I organized on my own without relying on Liza. Tommy, old enough to have his own phone, texted me often, telling me about school and his hobbies. Emily, more reserved and cautious, gradually began to open up too, especially when I offered to help her with a history project for school. One day, about 6 months after the move, I took the bold step of offering to take my grandchildren to my house for the weekend. I expected resistance from Liza, but to my surprise, she agreed without objection. Perhaps she too was tired of the tension between us and wanted some kind of resolution to the situation. The weekend with the grandchildren was wonderful. We visited the Natural History Museum that I had told Tommy about when we met a year ago, walked in the park, and played board games that I had bought for the occasion. Emily, having learned of my friendship with Eleanor, peppered me with questions, suspecting a romantic connection, which made me embarrassed to explain that we were just friends. "But you like her," Emily insisted with the insight of a 13-year-old girl. "Yes, I do," I admitted. "She's a smart and interesting woman." "Grandma wouldn't be offended," Emily said seriously. "She would want you to be happy." Those words, spoken with childlike candor, touched me to the core. Perhaps Emily was right. Catherine had always wanted me to be happy, and she would hardly approve of my spending the rest of my life alone, mourning for her. After that weekend, I started taking my grandchildren to my house regularly, usually once a month. Liza and Sean didn't mind. They needed a vacation too, and the free babysitter I provided came in handy. I didn't care what their motives were. The main thing was that I could spend time with Tommy and Emily, pass on my knowledge and experience to them, and show them that there were values other than material ones. With Liza and Sean, we maintained a polite but distanced relationship. They no longer asked me for money, and I did not interfere in their lives. We exchanged formal greetings on birthdays and holidays, but the close bond that should be between parents and children was no longer there. And to be honest, I didn't particularly regret it. My new life gave me a fulfillment I hadn't felt in a long time. I had friends, interesting activities, and plans for the future. Eleanor and I grew closer, though both of us took our time, enjoying simple human companionship and mutual understanding. One evening, sitting on my small balcony and watching the sunset, I thought about how strangely things had turned out. The theft of my pension, which seemed like such a disaster a year ago, was actually a turning point that changed my life for the better. I was finally free from toxic relationships, guilt, and obligations that kept me from living life to the fullest. Of course, I was sad that my only daughter was capable of such an act. It was painful to realize that our relationship would probably never be truly close and trusting. But I learned to accept it as part of reality, not allowing bitterness and disappointment to poison my life. In contrast, the relationship with my grandchildren has grown stronger and deeper. Without the constant interference of Liza and Sean, I could communicate with them directly, be myself, share my knowledge and experiences. And most importantly, I could set an example for them. The example of a man who doesn't let circumstances or other people define his life, who finds the strength to start over, even when all seems lost. It was getting evening. I finished my tea and was about to head back to the apartment when the phone rang. It was Tommy. "Grandpa," he said excitedly, "I won first prize at the science fair for the dinosaur project we discussed with you." "Congratulations, my boy." I was genuinely happy. "I knew you could do it." "Will you come to the awards ceremony next Friday?" he asked hopefully. "You can invite your relatives, and I want you to come." "Uh, of course I will," I said without hesitation. I wouldn't miss such an important event. After the conversation, I stood on the balcony for a long time, looking at the lights of the city that lit up at dusk. Life went on despite all the trials and disappointments, and perhaps the most important thing this difficult year had taught me was to appreciate what really matters. Not money, not material goods, but human connections based on mutual respect and trust. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I was sure of one thing. I would no longer let anyone take away my dignity, and this confidence gave me the strength to face each new day with optimism and hope.